In this video, we're going to learn about density, and we'll learn how we can calculate density if we know the mass and the volume of an object. And this will apply to some things you may have noticed about matter. You might notice that when you drop certain pieces of matter into water, some of them will float and some of them will sink. And you might have wondered why that is. And that has to do with the density of the object. So what is density? Density is the amount of matter that is in a given volume, and we need to know two pieces of information about the piece of matter. So we need to know the mass of the matter, so how much mass it has. So for instance, this flask weighs 10 grams, and then we also need to know the volume of a substance. So in this case, it's 40 milliliters. And if we have those two pieces of information, we can calculate density. So we can use something that we refer to as a density triangle to help us figure out the value if we know two of the values. So remember, we've got three things here. We have density is measured in grams per milliliter, and mass is measured in grams, and volume is measured in milliliters. So the way we use this triangle is if we know two pieces of information, so say we knew mass and we knew volume, we could find the third value. So the way the triangle works is if the objects are over and above the things that you know, and we were trying to find out density, it would be equal to mass divided by volume. But say we knew the density and the volume, and we wanted to find out the mass, then the formula would be mass equals density times volume. So what you do is you cover up or identify the value you want, and then you figure out where the other two values are in relationship to each other. So say we wanted to know the volume, we could calculate the volume by taking the mass and dividing the density. So these are all the different values that we could do, or the ways we could manipulate this triangle. And we're going to go through some examples of these calculations. In our first example, we're being asked to find the density of this red ball. So the first thing we need to do is find the mass. So we'll put the ball on the scale, and then we'll read the scale. And imagine that the ball has a mass of 25 grams. So we'll write that piece of information down. So the mass, or M, equals 25 grams. So we have one piece of information. So the next thing we need to do is find the volume of the ball. And because the ball is round, it's a little bit harder to find the volume. So one way you can do that is to find how much volume that object displaces if you place it in water. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the ball into a graduated cylinder and then see how far the water level rises. So what we're going to do is place it in, and then we can see that the water level has gone from 40 milliliters down here and jumped all the way up to 60 milliliters. So to find out the volume, we would need to find out the difference between the two. So our final volume was 60 milliliters after we put the ball in, and we are going to subtract the initial volume of the water that was in the flask, 40 milliliters. So we actually have a grand total of 20 milliliters. So now we're going to solve our problem. So remember, from our triangle, density, here's our triangle, density is equal to mass divided by volume. So here is our formula right here. And we know our mass and we know our volume from our examples. And we're just going to write those values down so we can remember. So our mass was equal to 25 grams, and our volume was equal to 20 milliliters. So now we can plug those values into our formula. So density is equal to mass over volume. So it's equal to 25 grams over 20 milliliters. If we plug those values into our handy dandy calculator, we'll find out that we get a density of 1.25 grams for every milliliter. And that's the density of our ball. So therefore, the density of the ball is 1.25 grams per milliliter. So we'll try another example, but this time it won't be as straightforward as the last one, and so it's not going to be density equals mass over volume. We're going to look for one of the other values. So in this example, the density of a ball is 0.75 grams per milliliter. If it takes up 15 milliliters, what is the ball's mass? So again, if we look at our density triangle, this time the value we're trying to find is mass. So mass is going to be equal to density times volume. So we'll write that formula out. So mass equals density times volume. And let's just extract the information from the word problem. So we know our density. Density is equal to 0.75 grams per milliliter. And we know our volume. Volume is equal to 15 milliliters. So now we'll put those values into our formula. So mass is equal to 0.75 grams per milliliter times 15 milliliters. So now we need to put that into our handy dandy calculator. So the answer, the mass, is 11.25 grams. So therefore, the mass of the ball is 11.25 grams. And that's how you calculate density.